Hello and welcome to Wide Open Throttle. And I hope you like the French racing blue shirt, because our first topic of discussion today is the Bugatti Veyron, and we have a great panel with us today because between us we've driven all 4 Veyron variants. Not a bad record for a car whose total production run is barely 380 units. So Bugatti Veyron, Kim, I think you were the first at MotorTrend to actually drive the original 1001 horsepower car quite a few years ago. What's your main recollection of driving it?
It was quite memorable. We were at El Toro doing the normal testing, and I had a chance to go down one of those long runways, and you just nail it, and the acceleration is fantastic, obviously. There's a lot of cars with great initial acceleration, but this just stays there. It keeps doing it and doing it and doing it, and then the needle goes farther and it keeps doing the same acceleration. And at some point you just wonder if it's not going to just launch off the surface of the earth and go into orbit, because it just keeps going. It's an astonishing thing. Another memorable from the testing was standing behind it during some of the acceleration runs and feeling this just wash of hot air blast over you. Because for a car to make 1001 horsepower, it's burning a lot more gas than that, because the thing is running at 25% efficiency or 20%. So that all the rest of that is heat that's going out.
Well, I'm with you on the acceleration. I drove the Veyron Grand Sport and the Grand Sport Vitesse at Erlesian. And in my 30 years of road testing, I've never felt a car that just has that, it's relentless thrust. To me, it accelerates from 100 to 200 miles an hour with the same sort of urgency that a Nissan GT-R goes from 0 to 100. And that's utterly amazing. And Ed, you drove the 1200 horsepower Super Sport.
Yeah, and I'm really glad you brought up GT-R just now and in your video. I got a lot of flack for comparing it. You know, I said, oh, Veyron's kind of feels like a big GT-R, but really it is. That's the first thing I thought of when I drove the Super Sport. Like you said, that 0 to 100 to 125, similar feeling to a lot of supercars that we drive. But then after that, when other cars slow down, Veyron just keeps going, keeps pulling, and you're like, oh my God, this thing is not slowing down.
I think it's just an incredible piece of engineering, and you know, what's fascinating about that car is Ferdinand Piëch announced that they were going to build it and it was going to look just like the concept car, and all the VW Group engineers went, oh my God, because they had no idea. Theoretically the car was possible, but they had no idea how they were actually going to make it do 250 plus miles per hour. And it was one of the most, it was a fairly troubled development program, I'm hearing in my sources. And when they went, the biggest problem was tires. And when they went to all the tire manufacturers and said, we need a tire that will run a 4,400 pound car to beyond 250 miles an hour, all the tire makers just laughed and said, can't do it. Michelin were the only people that took it on.
And even then, you only get a certain amount of attempts at that speed before you have to change the tires, right?
Pierre-Henri Raphael, who's the Bugatti test driver, who I think is quite possibly the bravest man in the world. Not because he did 268 miles an hour in the Super Sport at Erlesian, but because he has to sit next to people like us and also prospective owners while they're testing a Veyron. But that 268 mile an hour run, he told me that Michelin has a tire dyno, and they took the tires up to 270 miles an hour, which is as fast as the dyno will run. So 270 miles an hour for 20 seconds, then back to 250 miles an hour for 20 seconds. And they repeated that twice more, then the tires exploded. And before he went out on the run, the Volkswagen engineers were saying, well, we think the tires should be good for the run.
Now, what do you say to the people who draw comparisons to like the AMS GT-R or the Hennessy Venom GT and so on?
In 20 years, 30 years from now at a Cars and Coffee type of car gathering, those other cars might be there as well as a Veyron. And the other cars, people will walk by and say, oh, I remember this. You know, that was an interesting car. They'll be crowded around the Veyron because it was symbolic of an era.
Will we ever see its like again?
Well, haven't you heard? I guess you might have heard that they're building a super Veyron, right? Isn't that the rumor?
That's the rumor. I mean, I did talk to one of their engineers a few months back, and he said, "Look, making more horsepower out of that W16 is not a problem. The 1,200 horsepower, they can get more. So it's a matter of just cranking up the boost and getting more air into the car. That's not the problem. I think the real problem is tires." And so what I'm hearing is that maybe the Super Veyron, they're going to pull maybe 1,000 pounds out of it. 500 kilos, they're changing a lot of the structure on the car. If they pull that weight out, maybe the existing tyres can cope. Because they're talking about 288 miles an hour with this car.
But wouldn't they have to have a hybrid system? I mean, everybody is going towards a hybrid drivetrain, LaFerrari P1, Porsche 918. I mean, to be that next generation supercar, to have that green message, isn't that, I mean, and how do you pull weight out?
So maybe the emphasis is going away from top speed.
I think there's two things. I think they're going to probably wait and see what all of these new supercar guys come out with, Ferrari, McLaren, Porsche. And then it comes down to ego, because this is very much PX like baby. If you feel slighted in the least by some of these new supercars, then yeah, he'll turn up the wick and make an even faster version of the Veyron.
And you can't underestimate Ferdinand Piech's determination. I mean, he does own a Veyron. He's got one for his wife as well, and they both drive them. And he is the man that's given us cars like the Porsche 917 race car. The original Audi Quattro was his car. He reinvented Volkswagen. Remember, Volkswagen used to make dowdy little sedans, and look at the cars they make now. The interesting thing about watching the top speed run in the Vitesse at Erlesian was just how effortless it looked. I mean, the straight is 5 miles long, and by the time Antonelli went past us, he was doing over 250 miles an hour. Just the sonic boom from that was quite amazing. But this little graph we've got here from Bugatti really shows the rate of acceleration. It's quite extraordinary, isn't it, Kim?
Yeah, looking at this, what we were initially recognizing is that when he lifted off and the world record was achieved, the car was still accelerating. So he really ran out of room. It wasn't a question of that was the top speed. It could still probably have gone faster, but even at that track, which is probably the best place in the world to do this, it wasn't big enough.
Well, one of the problems the engineers were worried about was it was very, very cold, and the big concern for them was that increased the aerodynamic drag on the car. So it probably took him longer to get to 254 than it would have had it been a warmer day. Well, the GT-R is one of those icon cars too, I think, that people will be talking about for a long time, and it's fitting we've come to discuss the GT-R in the context of the Veyron because it moves us to our next story. And GT-R always attracts a lot of attention, and Carlos, your verdict in the head-to-head with the GT-R versus the Audi R8 and the R8 1 has just set the internet on fire. You're just a troublemaker.
Yeah, not in a good way. Well, the thing is, there's a convincing argument for both cars, I think, that the GT-R is so freaking fast and so capable, and it's just an absolute monster in terms of performance. I mean, if you want to be the fastest guy on the street against anything, excluding a Veyron, that's the car you get. That said, when I drove it, when Randy drove it, when Ed drove it, we both got out of that in the R8, and we're just thinking, it's just, we all want to be back in the R8 after we drive it. We have more fun in the R8. We enjoyed that experience more, even though it is slower.
I mean, everything about the R8 that we know and love, the seating position, that view of the road. I mean, you feel like in a Formula car. It's like in driving an NSX or a Ford GT. These mid-engine vehicles where you just sit solo. I was telling Carlos, it's like you sit in an R8, like you're in a bathtub, like a high-sided bathtub. You sit on the GT-R. When you get out of the R8 and you get in the GT-R, you feel like you're sitting on top of the car.
But to be fair to the internet, though, I mean, it wasn't even close, wasn't it? I mean, the GT-R was significantly faster.
GT-R killed it everywhere in terms of performance, and it definitely earns respect for that. I mean, that is an incredible machine. It is a supercar killer.
Yeah, it was a moment at the track at Streets of Willow where you get the data from the V-Box and you look at the curves and look at the numbers and you just sort of pause. 2.4 seconds.
And it's not just the speed, it's how easy it is to attain. Anybody can run a fast lap in a GT-R. Maybe not that fast, but a really fast, respectable lap time is really easy. Randy hopped out of it and said, I don't think this needs traction or stability control, because it just doesn't do anything except stick, go to a corner, and then just explode out of it.
Yeah, he said he wanted his race car to drive like that.
Exactly.
To be as easy, to go fast and go fast for a long time, but also he'd rather take an R8 as well. I mean, that's
the R8 was more fun.
So that's an age-old dilemma, and Kim and I have been road testing cars for an awful long time, and you get this debate between a numbers car and an emotional car. And I think this is what we're seeing here, is the Audi's the much more emotional car. It's the one you fall in love with, and the GT-R is the one you you just respect, because they've done a brilliant job of engineering.
Well, what we came to the conclusion is, you know, the GT-R is faster, it's a cheaper one. If you want to be fast, that's what you want. The R8, the quality of it though, and that the fact it could do so much more than be fast. You know, it can ride you in comfort. You could drive it every day. It is more engaging at slower speeds. The quality of materials, the ride quality, the transmission smoothness, all those things make that car worth it.
Well, I even have a more complicated way of explaining it. I'm Mr. Cheapskate, so for me, GT-R would be an easy choice.
Well, Mr. Cheapskate actually is a good segue to our next piece. The new C7 Corvette pricing has been announced, and they've said that the base car is going to be another $1,400 compared with equivalent C6 now. I think that's actually good value, but
I think so too. It's a deal in my book, just based on what you're getting and also the perception, right? Everyone's going to be clamoring to be the first to have this car out on the road. It looks super high tech. It immediately puts the C6 on the trailer in terms of just sort of shock value. That alone is worth $1,400. I think the question is, in the first year these things are on sale, how many people are going to be able to buy it with just that little bit added, with no dealer markup? I think it's a bit of a red herring there.
what I'm welcoming now is the recognition that the Corvette is a global sports car. It's one of the real sports car icons. It's America's 911, it's America's Ferrari, it's America's Jaguar. And they're building the car to really reflect this is what America can do.
This is what the new GM will do. They're not going to build it to a price. They're going to price it accordingly. They're going to build a vehicle that is going to deliver, I think, more performance, as we'll see, definitely a better interior package. I think the jury is still out amongst the enthusiasts whether the exterior is an improvement. I think it is fantastic.
I think it is too.
But they're not going to try to stack them high and sell them cheap.
Well, and you're seeing more of everything too. I mean, we're talking about the way it looks and the fact it has a real interior and all this, but you're getting more power from a new direct injected engine that didn't cost $1,400 to develop a new V8 engine there. And you've got a 7-speed manual transmission and a new all aluminum frame and new everything. I mean, it's really the biggest rethink they've had of the car and probably since the 80s.
I welcome that shift in the mindset that's happened with the Corvette team. In other words, they're saying, no, we know how to build a really good sports car. If you want, you'll have to pay for it. And I think that's fair enough. I mean, it hasn't stopped Porsche being one of the most successful sports car makers in the world.
And you can still get your base Corvette with an automatic transmission and without any special performance and options or anything else. I mean, you're not being priced out.
They are going to do a car that's not going to be called the Stingray, aren't they? They're going to do an entry-level Corvette with a 5.3, and it's going to be a base car, not as fast, not as powerful, but still have all the great styling. I think that's a good move, actually.
Corvette's got such a range, again, from the base model all the way to the top end. What are we going to compare it against? What stories are we going to do with this thing? I mean, is it an F-type competitor? At what point is it a... The comparisons are always unfair when we start talking like 911, because 911s, you put one option, two options on them, they're over $100,000.
And I think 911 and Corvette is interesting because if you want to figure out where to take Corvette, 911's rolled out the playbook anyway, and Chevrolet started to follow that. So you have your entry-level car, which is your two-wheel drive Carrera, all the way up to the 911 Turbo, which now we have the ZR1. And then you've got room for GT3s, Z06 is a GT3, you've got convertibles. I think for me anyway, the C7 is one of the cars on my must-drive list for this year, and you can be assured that as soon as we get access to a C7, we'll bring you the full story online, on video, and of course in MotorTrend magazine. Till next week, see you then. Bye.